This public community meeting is
Recording in progress.
being presented to you by the California Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Toxic Substances Control, also known as DTSC. Our mission is to protect California's people, communities, and environment from toxic substances, to enhance economic vitality by restoring contaminated land, and to compel manufacturers to make safer consumer products. Next slide, please. Now I will hand it over to Valisa.
Thank you, Laura. For our agenda this evening, we will receive welcome remarks from Meredith Williams, Director of DTSC. Then we'll have a recap of the Exide project activities and residential cleanup launch by Todd Sachs, Deputy Director of the Site Mitigation and Restoration Program. We'll have an overview of the last ETAG workshop public meeting by Sterling Grant, Deputy Director, Office of Environmental Equity. Next slide, please. Next, we will have an update on the work program by Ernesto Pantoja with Labor's International Union of North America, also known as LUNA. Lastly, we will receive a presentation from Brian Strand with DTSC on the newly released Exide Cleanup Feedback Management System. Next slide, please. Now I would like to welcome Meredith Williams, Director of the Department of Toxic Substances Control, to give opening remarks. Meredith?
Good evening, bienvenidos. Thank you everyone for coming. I always appreciate seeing a great turnout on a school night after people have had a long day of work. So thank you for making the time. This is our first meeting of the year, and we're happy to be here again at the Y. It's a good venue, and very helpful, conducive to having good conversation. I think most of you are well aware that the cleanup had been paused since the end of October, the residential cleanup, and I'm pleased to say we started the work back up again, and this meeting was timed with that in mind, knowing that as we start work back up, there are likely a lot of questions about what's different as we move forward from how the cleanup was done before, what's the same, how do I get my questions answered. We've been thinking through those things. We hopefully have all the information you're looking for tonight, and then we want to make sure that you know how to get in touch with us and get those questions answered with a live person, through our website, through the hotline, whatever way we can, so that you have what you need to understand what's going to happen at your property, what's the department doing, how's the department communicating with the community, with the workers, are the workers being protected, all of those questions. So with that, I, again, thank you so much for coming this evening and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Meredith. Now I would like to welcome and introduce Todd Sachs, Deputy Director for the Department of Toxic Substances Control. He will be doing a recap of the Exide project activities and residential launch. Todd?
Hi. So next slide, please. So what I'm going to be talking about today is what we've been working on over the past year. We heard from a lot of you in public meetings early last year concerns about the way the site was being managed and a desire for more input into how we do our work. And for the last year, we've been working to do that. So next slide. So this cleanup is one of the largest in the United States. This cleanup is one of the largest in the United States, and you all who live here know that better than anybody. It's, for the people who live here, one of the most important things, because for a long time there has been lead in your soil, and you all are concerned about it. We are too. That's why we're here trying to fix the situation. We've made a lot of progress on the site, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And we've also taken many actions over the past year to try to address the concerns that we've heard from you, to try to make the cleanup, to try to improve it, so that it meets the expectations of you all in the community, because we are doing this for you. Next slide. So I'm going to start with our progress to date. Next slide. So we completed the removal action. So the removal action is the plan that describes how we're going to clean up individual properties, and we've done that at 4,980 parcels, including schools, daycare centers, and parks. We are starting new work with a contract that is going to allow for the removal action at an additional 1,000 residences or more. And we also have contracts that we are putting in place to be able to do that work on parkways as well. So parkways is a strip of land in front of the front yards along the streets, often contiguous or right next to people's yards, and so we're going to be addressing those as well. We have also, as part of our work, increased our engagement with representatives of ETAG. So we've spent a lot of time over the past year with representatives of this community to try to understand and address and make sure that we're doing the cleanup in ways that are effective and respectful of your concerns. Next slide. So this gives you an idea of how many meetings we've had in the last year. We've had 17 different discussions with the working group. These are typically about 2 hours long. And they're with the heads of the Exide Technical Advisory Group. So some of them are here tonight, and you can engage with them and get their opinions on how the process has worked. I'm not going to claim to represent them on that, but I can tell you from our perspective, it's been effective in trying to take the steps that we need to do on the site. We've had 4 public meetings last year. We met with the county, we meet with them monthly, we meet with local governments monthly to keep them up to speed, and we've had 2 public meetings. So 2 public meetings and 4 ETAG meetings. Next slide. So now I want to talk about how we've worked to respond to your concerns. Next slide. So we are working to increase transparency. This means we're working to put more information out so that you all can see exactly what we're doing. We're working to improve worker health and safety requirements at the site, and we've put new requirements in place to address that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well. We're working to support workers, and we have more work to do in that area, but we've also put some provisions in place that we think are going to help. We're working to ensure the cleanups meet removal action requirements, and that all of that is documented and available for you all to see. We are working to address tenant issues, especially where there are landlords that have tenants with children that have not chosen to be sampled and take the cleanup, and so we're working on trying to make sure that those sites are addressed. We're working to expand communications to try to be more effective in that realm, and and I'll talk a little bit about that, and then focus on community health as well, are some of the concerns that we've heard here raised. So the bullets at the top of this slide are the ones we've done the most on. As you move towards the bottom, we're engaged in them, but we are still working on them. So I'm going to talk where we are today on each of these. Next slide. So in increasing transparency, the first thing we did is we redesigned the Exide webpage. So if you go to the Exide website, then you'll see that it looks different, and hopefully it's easier to navigate. All of our letters of completion. So when we've completed the removal action, there is a letter that is issued to the property owner. And it provides detailed documentation on everything that was done, where the excavations were done, if there was lead remaining, how much was there, and where is it. And then what we're doing is we're taking all of those letters, we are removing any personally identifiable information, and then we're posting them to our website so that each of you can look up and see those letters for any site that's been subject to the removal action. We're about a third of the way through putting all 4,480 onto the website. So we continue to update that every week with more properties. We also have several planned improvements. So you're going to hear tonight about the Exide Cleanup Feedback Management System. This is a tool where you all can provide information to us. We can provide information back and also investigate issues, and also provide a more transparent way for you to get information back on the issues that you've raised with us. And so you're going to see more on that today. We're also making our air monitoring data that we do at each of the residences. We're going to be making that publicly available on our website for all of the properties that are cleaned up going forward. And we are also looking at lead monitoring data for workers and airborne lead measurements for workers. And we're going to be anonymizing this information because we don't want to intrude on the privacy of any individual worker. But we believe these data are going to be helpful for you all to understand the effectiveness of the health and safety program in protecting workers at this site. Next slide. One of the concerns that we heard was about worker health and safety, and what we have decided to do with input from the working group, who were instrumental, I think, in helping us to frame what the approach is going to be. We're putting new requirements in place that are going to hold the contractor to a new worker-led standard that's under development from Cal OSHA, but is not yet adopted. And so what that means is we are requiring the most stringent controls for workers for lead exposure anywhere in the country at this site. We're encouraging more frequent blood testing of workers so that we can monitor blood lead levels over time and be able to demonstrate that the program works. And if we see that there are issues, we will take additional action to make sure that those issues are addressed. We, as part of the contract, the contractor was required to develop a health and safety plan. And some of you may have participated in the ETAG meeting we had in December, where there was an opportunity for public input to that plan. That's the first time we've ever done anything like that, but I think the exercise was really valuable because we heard from a lot of workers on the types of things that work for them on protecting them, and use that to help update the health and safety plan to make it as protective as possible. Another concern we heard was about workers potentially taking lead home. And to address that issue, we're now going to be requiring workers to wear coveralls at the site when they're working at the site each day. And then those coveralls will be put on at the beginning of the day, taken off at the end of the day, and that will help ensure that workers are fully don't have lead on them when they go back home at the end of the day. And we've talked about the blood and personal exposure monitoring. So the point is that we're doing everything that we can to protect workers. We're holding them to the most stringent requirements anywhere in the country. And we're going to be doing additional monitoring to be able to demonstrate to you that it works. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about local workers at this site. Many of you know that we have a project labor agreement here, which is very, very important. We're trying to provide employment opportunities to people from the community to support the cleanup. And there are stringent requirements in the project labor agreement that we have to be able to do that. We're really proud to be working with the unions and all of the union workers to be able to do this, and also to be working with local people who are finding new job opportunities as part of participation in this program. So there is going to be a new boot camp and new training for an additional cohort of workers, because by the middle of this year, there will be more workers working in this community, I think, than we've ever had before, because we're going to, in addition to having the regular residential contract work, we're also going to be doing work in parkways. So it's going to be a very busy year, but we think it's going to be a very effective, and we hope a very positive year for us and for all of you as we continue to clean up the community. We are also developing a new policy, or at least trying to. We're exploring the development of a new policy to try to find ways to be able to identify issues between workers and between workers or employers at an earlier stage, so that we can try to avoid some of the issues that we saw last year between workers that we thought were an issue. So we want to make sure that we have a harmonious job site for everybody. We want people to feel positive when they're working on the job. We really appreciate the work that everyone does on site, and we hope that everyone treats each other respectfully. We're working to make sure that happens. One of the things we did for the first time on this site was we actually had a meeting with the heads of ETAG in the working group and with the contractor, so that the community representatives actually had an ability to express their desires and their expectations for the cleanup with the contractor. What we're trying to do is to provide more opportunities for the leaders in the community to be able to help influence the cleanup, because we think that this is really a partnership. It's important for all of us. Next slide. We're working to ensure the quality of cleanup, and part of that is that at the very end of the work at each property, going forward, we are doing what's called verification sampling. So in the very beginning, when we're assessing a residence, we take samples of soil to be able to understand how much lead is and where it is. And then we use that to develop a site-specific cleanup plan. What we're doing is at the end of the project, we're also taking samples in essentially the same locations to be able to demonstrate the benefit that the removal action has had at each site. And then that will be documented in the letters of completion that will be posted to our website. We also have an operations plan developed by the contractor for the site, which describes the specifics of everything that would be done at a site that is not part of the health and safety plan. And again, if you attended the ETAG meeting in December, there was an opportunity for the public to comment on that plan as well. So that was something we've done. That type of plan is new for us. The public input to that plan is new for us. But these were ideas that came to us from your leaders to help us find ways to be more effective and to provide more on-ramps for public engagement. I actually attended the meeting and I thought it was really positive. So for those of you who were there, I hope you did too. And then the last piece is we are putting what's called a third-party monitor on the site. So next slide. The concept of a third-party monitor was suggested by one of the ETAG members, modeled off of an approach that was used at LAX as they went through an expansion over the past decade. What a third-party monitor is it's an independent inspector that works at the site. In this case, they're paid by DTSC, but they report to us, and they also report to ETAG. And the purpose of that is to have an independent inspector going around looking at individual properties as they're being cleaned up, and they get to see independently whether or not the cleanup is done right. They get to report back to us, the company, and to you as to whether or not the work is being done right. So we hope you'll believe us because we're sincere in trying to make sure that this cleanup is done right. But if you don't, we hope you'll believe the third-party monitor because they are truly independent, and we are empowering them to be able to tell you what it is they see and to help us make sure that we're addressing everything that needs to be addressed. So, next slide. We are working to support tenants. This is another issue that we heard about from the working group, and so we are taking steps to hold landlords accountable if they have tenants with young children, for example, and where they haven't taken sampling to determine whether or not they qualify for the removal action. We are in the process of doing that work right now, and we do think it's going to show some success. So, for example, we did a pilot study at 10 properties. 3 provide us. We basically demanded that they provide us access, and 3 of them did, and the other 7 we are in various processes to try to gain access to those properties. Next slide. The last discussion is we've heard from all of you that there's a desire to look more broadly at public health issues. We've started having discussions with the working group on that, and the next step is for us at DTSC to be working with LA County and potentially with the California Department of Public Health to try to understand what additional resources could be brought to the community beyond the resources that DTSC can provide in its role of implementing the removal action in individual properties. So that work is ongoing. We'll need to report back to you at future meetings, but that was an issue that was brought up to us, and I wanted to let you know that we are working on it. Next slide. Now I want to talk a little bit about restarting the work because that's what we're engaged in now. Next slide. So work is restarting. We have a new contractor that's operating at the site. They are starting to stand up work teams to do work at individual properties. The third-party monitor, I understand, is going to be starting on, I believe, Tuesday of next week. And so We, as the work starts, both DTSC and the third-party monitor will be doing inspections at sites to be making sure that the contractor is doing the work that they're supposed to be doing. We are working on finalizing contracts for the parkways work, so by the middle of this year, there will be additional workers beyond just the Parsons contract working on the parkways. So there's going to be more workers working on the site here than there ever has been before. And finally, we plan on having quarterly ETAG meetings in public so that you can get readouts from the third-party monitor and so that you can hear from us on the progress that we're making and you can hear from the ETAG itself on the project, on the progress that's being made. We really feel like the ETAG overall is a really beneficial approach and we have a lot of work to do. I'm not going to say that everything's okay on the site, but I feel like we've put in the procedures in place to hopefully be able to make a dent in earning trust. The Exide Technical Advisory Group. So this was a group that was created even before DTSC got involved. And so there are leaders from, for example, East Yards for Environmental Justice, Comité Pro Uno. There's a representative from the UCLA Labor and Occupational Safety and Health Center. Communities for a Better Environment, others. Yeah, exactly. Right now, they are unpaid to work on ETAG. They're volunteering. I am unaware they get any money from DTSC, and I can't speak to what their other funding sources are. You can ask them. Yes?
They went to my house and they almost they checked the fuel.
Pardon, say that again?
They went. Chicago, something control. They went to my house, they made a hole in the back and the front. So that's still, I had to be here.
Yeah, so I think your question is that DTSC came and sampled at your home last year, but you haven't gotten feedback from us. We would be happy, I can take you to the back and we can work with you and with staff to be able to figure out what's going on with the property.
Todd, I just want to inform the room that we will have a Q&A session after speakers as well, so if we can hold questions.
And if I can just add, there is a table at the back where we have information about individual properties. And you can get your questions answered about what's happening in your individual properties at the, in the back of the room later.
We have comment cards also.
Are any of the tags related to any question
I would say, well, I'll just be blunt. There is, I would talk to, so, we keep those pretty separate, but there is one person on the ETAG whose mom works for DTSC.
Who's that?
That's my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got any questions?
Yeah. So we can talk more about that, or we can talk with Mark about it too. But being direct, I mean, that's what the answer is.
Okay, so you have, there's family members that are DTSC that are with the nonprofit.
There is one that I'm aware of. There's one that I'm aware of.
And then we're gonna add this for the Q&A session if you don't mind, because we.
It makes no sense to go any farther if we don't know what we're talking about. I asked about ETAG, that's the only question I had.
Okay. Did I answer it?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Very much.
Good. So I think next slide. So I think with that, that's what I've got to go through, but I'm happy to answer questions whenever we get to that. So thank you.
Now I would like to welcome and introduce Serlene Grant, Deputy Director with the Office of Environmental Equity at the Department of Toxic Substances Control on the Exide project. Serlene?
Thank you. I'm just gonna say off the cuff, I had some prepared remarks that I gave ahead of time. I think they got to the translator, the interpreter. So I may deviate a little bit, so I'm just gonna apologize now. Hi everyone, I'm Serlene Grant. I am the Deputy Director for the Office of Environmental Equity in DTSC. I am responsible for public participation, like meetings that we're having today, the team here that's hopefully making you feel comfortable and welcome. We all work together. I have public participation, I have environmental justice, and I have tribal affairs under my management. And so I come out to projects like this a lot to make sure that the community is being heard and represented. And so to that point, I want to talk about what we heard in the December 15th, 12th, 14th, the December 14th meeting, because there were a lot of people here then. A lot of the information that Todd presented shows that the cleanup continues to progress, and sometimes with a bump here and there, but we're making progress. And a number of the actions that Todd outlined in this presentation have come about because of your input at that meeting in December. So to that point, I want to review some of the highlights from the last meeting. In December, more than 120 of you participated in the meeting that was co-hosted by the ETAG, and we just explained who the ETAG is. From the months of working in this community, we knew that one of the key concerns that many of you had was the quality of work and the conduct of the previous contractor. So after a few discussions with the working group and members of the ETAG, and the pending arrival for the new contractor at the start of this year, we decided to come to you in December and hear your concerns regarding the mechanics of the project. How was it working? What else could be done? What were some of the ideas that would work better? And what were your concerns, as Todd explained, about the health and safety plan and the operations plan? As people who live here, who work on the project, as residents of the neighborhoods, we wanted to hear from you. Approximately 120 people showed up, 95 of them in the room, and 22 individuals on Zoom. The conversation was lively. If you were here in the facility, we met at the church. And if you were here, you might remember there were 7 tables, and there were 2 and 3 sets of people around each table, and we were sharing and getting information. And representatives from DTSC were there, representatives from the health department were there, representatives from ETAG were all there so we could hear from you directly. At the meeting, we listened, we took notes, and we went back to the office to talk about it with each other and with members of the ETAG group. And we talked about what was possible with the health and safety plan and what guidelines could we put into place. And Todd shared some of those tonight. But just so that you know that we did hear you, we talked about just about everything that came up. There were 56 pages of notes, of typed notes from that plan, from that meeting. I'm not going to go through all 56 pages of what was said, but I am going to take some highlights. Next slide. Oh, okay, we're there. And so what we heard were the concerns, as Todd talked about worker safety and the personal protective equipment. We heard your concerns about air quality monitoring, staff training, the Workforce for Environmental Restoration and Communities program, the work program that would employ people from right here in the communities that we serve, the lead exposure and blood testing for the lead levels, communications, how was information getting out and about, how were people learning about the program. The next phase of work with the parkways, that strip of land between someone's residential front yard and the street. We heard about outreach and language access, making sure that people were coming around who could speak the languages that needed to be spoken. And of course, the third-party monitor, which has been talked about. The site cleanup, the residential cleanup, how was that going? And cultural humility and cultural sensitivity. How do we enter into a community? How do the people representing DTSC enter into a community? We heard a lot about that. And workers' rights. Again, what are your rights as you're out there as a laborer? So those were some of the themes. And some of the specifics, again, more personal protective equipment such as coveralls or portable air monitors or extra precautions for laborers, such as overalls and tie backs. Worker safety was a key subject, and it should be, and we're glad for all of that input, because again, you all are out there every day. We wanted, people were concerned, I already said this, about language and cultural humility, and people talked about how the work was being done. They wanted to make sure that the crews were doing the work fully and thoroughly and not cutting corners just to get a property finished by a timeline or some schedule. Workers were concerned about the management and prioritizing the schedule instead of workers' health and safety. And I hope that as you hear more about the health and safety plan, you understand that we are prioritizing workers' health and safety. You asked about the air monitoring, how we were doing it, where we were doing it, when we were doing it. You asked about the parkways and when they would be cleaned. Wanted to make sure the residents were getting their homes. We wanted to make sure that the residents who were getting their homes clean knew exactly what was going to happen when the cleaning crews came in. And we were working on a communications plan to really make that a very clear step-by-step process. Someone offered the idea of having people who participated in the program actually kind of give testimonials or help other people understand the process. We wanted to make sure, or you wanted to make sure, that things were not optional, that the contractor had to do certain things, and that everyone would follow. And someone wanted a plan for the improper conduct from the workers, as well as protection from threatening residents. And we now have something that leans towards providing that. So we heard all those things and more, as I said, and that input got us to where we are tonight with the health and safety and operations plans and procedures. But what I really wanted to emphasize here is that your role as a community member, your role as a resident, as workers, as community leaders, not just city leaders, but community members who are connected to other community members who people come to say, hey, what's going on? That your role and your involvement is vital for this project. We learn from you, and as I have said before, and I'll say it again, and I'll continue to say it because it's what motivates me to do my work, our goal is to correct the historical wrongs that were done generations ago, and to make your community better for now and for the future. Through implementation of this updated health and safety plan and the operations plan, we can keep our commitment to you all for transparency, for the removal of contaminants, improved health and safety, employment opportunities, working with tenants as well as property owners, and clear communications to keep everyone informed. And on that note about clear communications, I think next up is Brian, who will talk about some communication. But if there's any questions to anything I said, I'll be glad to entertain them.
Thank you, Sirlene. Now we'll open it up for clarifying questions and public comments. There are various ways that you can make a comment here today. In person, by raising your hand, and when prompted by the facilitator, comment at their microphone. If you're participating on Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. You will be invited to unmute your audio when it's your turn to speak. If you are on your phone, you can press *9 to join the phone queue. We will say the last 3 digits of your phone number when it's your turn to speak. You can then press *6 to unmute your line. If you called in on our Spanish line and would like to ask a question, notify our Spanish translator. Our Spanish translator will be available to translate your questions and comments. Lastly, you can complete a comment card and submit it to any DTSC staff member.
Okay, with that, we're gonna go ahead and get started with our questions. And how about we go ahead and start with our public comment cards? We have Maria Estrada that would like to speak. Maria, if you don't mind standing. Hi, Maria. We have our team member right here coming with the microphone. If you can state your name and your affiliation with the Exide Project or association.
My name is Maria Estrada. I've actually been on many of your Zoom meetings and attended AQMD meetings and local meetings with community members. And I have a question, since we know that this area is being gentrified. I've never seen a work site where they're building new apartments or anything, where any of the construction workers are wearing any, hazmat uniforms. Are those sites being cleaned before they're building buildings on top of contaminated sites? Are the new residents that are moving onto those new buildings being told that they're living in a contaminated site? Because we know that in Cudahy, for example, KIPP was trying to build a charter school on top of a contaminated site, and they stopped it because they were going to build over the contamination. I don't know that's ever been done. I don't know if anyone's ever been notified. Do people that move into new, because people move all the time, they move into these homes and they don't know that it's contaminated. Shouldn't these areas have notifications all over that these homes are contaminated? You could actually put up, probably be easier, the addresses of the homes that are clean, and then you could just state that all the other ones have lead. Because people should know that they're moving into these homes and they're thinking they're going to start families and doing all this stuff. And I've spoken to many, many people that have had multiple miscarriages, stillborns, all kinds of stuff. You're my friend. His family members in the house died. 4 of his pets died of cancer. He's very sick, and his home hasn't been cleaned. So this is an ongoing problem. And again, I'd like to reiterate, and I said this before, it is very insulting to this community that the very government organization that your entire existence is here to protect the public from toxic substances and to prevent this kind of thing from happening is now overseeing the cleanup. And that is a problem. So I'm sure you understand why people are concerned, and the fact that this has been going on so long and it's taken so much for us to even get to the point where stuff that should have happened from day one has finally happened. So we're not really feeling it, you know what I mean? So, and I'm gonna let this go, but again, this is a problem, and my concern is, again, they're building all over here, they're planning on gentrifying this whole area. Are these new buildings, these new apartment complexes, these condos that are being built, are they clean sites? Are the people that are doing the construction being told that they're working on contaminated land? Because they're going to go home to their families wherever they live and contaminate their families.
Thank you so much, Maria. Appreciate your concern. Yes, that would be great. Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, so, Maria, I can answer that question a couple of different ways. First of all, in California, as in the United States, when a site is going to be developed, the people who own the property are responsible for assessing that property, and if it needs to be cleaned up, to be cleaned up. We work on thousands of sites at a time across the state, and we're not the only agency that oversees cleanups. The regional water boards also oversee cleanups, and local agencies also oversee cleanups. So hazardous material cleanups happen across the state every day. And if you were interested in a particular site, I could get you more information on it and look through several databases and try to figure out who, if anyone, is working on it. When the sites are assessed, there are appropriate precautions that are taken to make sure that the site is controlled, to make sure that as the cleanup progresses, that the people are protected, and that when new buildings are built, that those buildings are built to code and are built to ensure that it's protective given the contamination that is either there or while it's being removed. So there are processes for that, and we do that work every day. With regard to the gentrification issues, I can't really speak to that, but we do work on projects that involve low-income housing all the time, and we work on projects that involve market rate housing all the time. What's important for us is making sure that the cleanups are done appropriately, And then the land use decisions are made by local agencies that make decisions about what gets built where. We don't really have a role in that process, but we work to make sure the cleanups are done properly. And finally, what I would say about this site in particular, the process that led to the contamination of lead being in the soil was from air emissions from the site over the course of 100 years. It's a sad and unfortunate fact, but we live in the aftermath of industrialization, and here in Los Angeles, you're at ground zero for it because there's been industry all over the city. And when those emissions were released, if it was lead, it would fall out onto the ground, and over the course of generations, that's what led to the lead being in your soils. Environmental laws came in place in the 1970s and 80s, and those laws have become more stringent over time. But the reality is that the facility operated from 1920 to at least the 1950s, if not the 1980s, probably with very little controls at all because pollution controls hadn't been invented yet. So, our role at DTSC is to try to address these situations as best we can. And we're working to do that here in this community, in your community, because it's important. We're not saying that the situation is great, but we're trying to address it as best as we can.
Thank you so much for that, Todd. Our next community member is Doug Marshall, I believe it is. Do we have a Doug Marshall here? There he is. Hi, Mr. Marshall. Thank you so much.
Okay, first of all, I recognize that you guys got thrown into a big mess around here. You've done quite a bit of work. It's way beyond what DTSC has ever called on to do before. And we really appreciate your interest and all the work that you've done to try to clean it up. My specific question is, when are you going to clean up my property? I'm at 2.0 miles from the Exide plant. You are only cleaning up to 1.7. I have analysis here by an independent company that says I have lead at 160, 170 parts per million. And it's obvious that I need to clean it up. So what you gonna do about me?
Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
So, when we evaluated the lead that was in soils surrounding the Exide facility, we made a decision to define the area within which we're cleaning up based on a combination of factors. One of those was how much lead is in the soil, and another one is, do we have confidence that the lead actually came from the facility? The reality is that we've seen in other studies that are done across the state and across the United States that there's lead in soils from a number of different sources. It can include lead-based paints. It can include fallout from past lead and gasoline. It can include lead from industrial sources. And in this community, it was dominated by lead from the Exide facility within the PIA. So there is lead in soils outside of the PIA, but we are focused on cleaning up lead inside the PIA because it came from Exide.
Thank you, Todd. We have a community member, I hope I'm not saying this incorrectly, Mario Alvarez. There he is. Hi, Mr. Alvarez. One of our team members will come.
I've been living over there in East LA for 66 years. I have 4 girls and 1 boy. My oldest girl, she had migraines for so many years. They operated their nose through the nose to take whatever was over here. The second one, she miscarried a baby. She couldn't hold the baby. The third one, just 2 weeks ago, they operated his heart. They put something to, she can breathe better. The fourth one had a migraine too. She is a high school teacher. And she had to move from here to Los Angeles because of a change, what I'm going to tell you. She was the vice principal, school over here right in the middle of downtown. And she applied for the top position. They brought a man, and they give it to him. She had to go out of the state to get a job. She went to, right now she is in Oregon. And I don't see why this thing happened. The person who was given the job that my daughter applied, they took her away from principal because he had enough to be principal. You see how good the Los Angeles school is running. I think it's a shame. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know. Okay, so thank you so much, sir. We do have a question that was written down on the card. Danya, I'm going to ask you to stand up for this question. One of our community members, I think Antonio, his question is, when do we know if we qualify? If we qualify for lead cleanup? So there are two questions. And so, Mr. Antonio, I have your question here. Danya, if you can stand up, Danya is going to assist you with finding out if you qualify. So if you can, make sure you see your way. She's wonderful. She'll answer any question you have. Thank you. Okay, we're going to take two more questions, and then we're going to go online because we have some questions online. Rocio Maya, community member? Yes, hi Rocio. One of our community members is coming with the microphone. There she is.
I was taking notes on your presentation, and I think in the spirit of transparency, I'll try to be as brief as possible. You guys, okay, so you guys are saying that you cleaned up 4,980 parcels, but in the spirit of transparency, it'd be good to know also how much has it cost the taxpayers and Californians, and because there have been a lot of mistakes that have been done, and I mention this because even people here are saying that there's not enough money to clean the houses. A house in front of my house got cleaned, and there's the wind and all of these things. I worked in the project for a little bit, so yeah, the lead isn't gonna necessarily go away with, and it's concerning the amount of funding that's available, and we'd like to know as a community how much it's cost so far. Another note I made with your presentation was another note I made is, I know that as a former community member, I collaborated with a lot of the nonprofits, and I'm really grateful for the ETAG for all they have done for us to make sure that we get the jobs that we got. It just comment real quick, very interesting to me how the subcontractor, although they were not in charge of the actual work, they had a hand in the accidents, even a death that occurred at the site. So it's just really interesting how a lot of us whistleblowers, we can't get there's a system now where we can't get a job within this. And as a disenfranchised woman of color, I'm in a destitute situation. I would benefit from being a part of this project again. And I have a lot of safety experience from the fact that I was part of the project before. And I know a lot of the stuff. So I guess the message the new workers are getting is, if you guys speak out, we will not help you. So all of these things that you're saying, Mr. Todd, about how you're gonna, support us and support the workers, just y'all should know, who's ever new here, if you are a whistleblower, you're not gonna be having any support, as that has been my experience. And then, and the contractor on your website on transparency, there is a bill from 2017, so this is not a new contractor that you've worked with. So it just seems like you guys are just recycling these contractors at this point. So those are my comments. I don't know if I have.
Thank you so much. Is it on?
Well, thank you for the question. I'll start by the cost. We used to provide that breakdown of the cost. Unfortunately, this week we haven't, but we can make that available. That's not an issue. We have absolutely nothing to hide as far as cost goes. This is a kind of reminder because we tend to forget that when COVID came after 2021, there was a major inflation that hit the country. So the cumulative inflation that we have currently is close to 40%. So can you imagine, we're working with a budget that was given in 2021, but we never imagined that there would be a 40% inflation. But regardless, our commitment and mandate is to complete 5,940 properties by the second quarter of 2025. And we think we should be able to close that mandate and successfully complete that mandate within the funding that has been made available to us. Was there something?
And could you say about how many ppm that would get us to?
Yeah, and that was also, that relates to a lot of questions that were asked. If you're unsure if your house qualifies or not, when the team reach out to you and share the information of the sampling reports, every house that is 200 ppm and above, 200 parts per million and above, should qualify for cleanup. So if your house is at 200 parts per million, please reach out to us. We have a hotline. We have tried our very best to reach out to every property. Sometimes the owners are not there or the tenants don't give us the information. But if you feel that your house is at 200 parts per million, please don't hesitate. Reach out to us.
Just to be clear, that's the funding that we currently have. We have funding to clean up 5,940 properties. And at that time, we will expect to have cleaned up the properties that are 200 parts per million or above contamination in the soil.
And lastly, if I may, very quick, we have shared with you that there is a request. The state has requested that this project get put under a Superfund listing. So this process is still ongoing. We don't have a lot of information because we're at the early stages. And I'm sure that moving forward, we can share more information as it becomes available. But we hope that the listing will provide the additional funding that we need to complete more properties.
Thank you, Mehdi. We're going to now, I just want to remind everybody that this is a hybrid meeting, so we have community members that are participating online. So we're going to transition and take some questions online. Our team is getting ready to do that. Before they do, I want to acknowledge a couple of members. We have our BS board member here that's listening. Lizette Royce is here. And then we have some of our ETAG members. Just wanted to acknowledge your presence. Felipe Aguilar and Rania Subti, and then we have Janice Scully. So they're present and listening. And so with that said, I'd like to go ahead and transition to our first question online. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We do have a couple of community members joining us online. So the first question comes from Mr. Juan. Mr. Juan, whenever you're ready, please go ahead and make your question and your comment.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, our first point of contact after they came out to measure our property was with Ricardo Nava, and that was from DTSC. This is back in 2022, at the beginning of 2022, when I reached out to him because we have, in our house, we have 3 kids, and now there's a kid who just turned one year old in January. So we had a pregnant woman, and then there was 3 kids. So now there's a total of 4 kids, right? and they told me to reach out, and because they were doing the property adjacent to us that had higher than 200 parts per million, but the contractor did not tape the plastic to the bottom of the fence. Unfortunately, I wasn't home. I leave at 6 o'clock to go to work. I get back at 4:30, and yes, they were cleaning my driveway. They were cleaning my sidewalk, some other dirt that came this way. But you could get all the windows, the walls, and everything that could spill over when there was a windy day, and there was no tape. From the plastic that you put on the fence, it wasn't held back at the bottom. So it was a whole mess. I complained to them. They came out and they cleaned it. But at the same time, I asked them, hey, when are we going to get ours? Because ours is at 191 parts per million. But I was under the impression that there was kids living there, or we had a pregnant or newborn. When do we get our turn? Where's my point of contact? Since Ricardo doesn't answer, I send them several emails, and I have the email.
Thank you. Do we have anybody that want to respond to that question? Okay. What we'll do, sir, is we will get your contact information, and we'll have one of our team members respond to you directly. More than likely, we'll try and reach out to you tomorrow to get more information and see how we can move forward and resolve any issue that you might be having. So our team member will get your contact information. Thank you so much for calling in. Yes.
No, sounds good. Thank you.
One more piece of information that's relevant. We have talked about the 200 parts per million, but for everybody's benefit, we are coordinating with the county health department. When we get notified that there is a health issue in any property, we put that priority as a priority number one. So there is a good level of coordination between the county and the state when there are some health issue in any specific property.
Thank you, Manny. Do we have another question?
Yes. Well, our next question is from Mr. William. Mr. William, please, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes. Go right ahead.
Okay, so I'm wondering what would be an approximate date for when homes that are under 200 parts per million will be cleaned up. We're at 154, we're within the range, but since 2021, we've been just waiting. And so it kind of puts on hold any repairs or renovations that you want to do if you know that your soil's going to get ripped up eventually, if it has lead. And we're just wondering if there's a timeline at all for when that's going to happen.
Thank you so much for that, William. Benny, would you like to respond? Thanks.
Yeah, at this point, with the funding that we have, we know that we're going to exhaust that funding, and we are going to achieve that mandate of 5,940 property by the second quarter of 2025. So it's hard for us to start. We don't want to speculate and give you the wrong dates until we secure additional funding. I was talking earlier about us coordinating with USDA about the NPL listing. We will be transparent. As soon as we have more information, we can share. But at this point, all we can say is that we have enough funds to clean up all properties exceeding 200 parts per million. So our team will reach out to you as soon as we have the information about the additional funding.
Thank you so much. We have one more question online, and then we'll transition back to in-person.
Thank you, Dan. The last question is from Mr. Schneider. Mr. Schneider, good evening. Please, whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
We hear you, Mr. Snyder. Go right ahead.
Yes, I just had a short comment. As I was hearing the board talk about the decades of industrial pollution involving paint, leaded paint, and leaded fuel, but I just think it's important to also include temporary permits and how they have perpetually allowed communities to be contaminated. Temporary permits have been why these companies continue to get around proper procedures and operating procedures. So please, for the transparency of the community, the public there, please remember to include how temporary permits have damaged communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to transition to our Spanish Bridge line and see if we have any questions from our community members that are participating on the Spanish Bridge line. No questions? Okay. I'm sorry, sir?
No.
You have a question?
If anybody can speak Spanish, I know a lot of people from some of the southern.
We have, yes, we do have interpreters here. We do. Okay, and so with that, I'm going to ask, we do have more questions, but we have two more presentations that we need to get to, but there will be more opportunities for questions and comments. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and transition to Ernesto. Okay, don't give me Ernesto. Pantoja. Okay, thank you. From Local 300, Luna. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As Ian said, my name is Ernesto Pantoja. I'm the liaison on behalf of our business manager, Sergio Rascon, at La Una, or Laborers Local 300, here to speak about the work program and the new cohort of workers. When we partnered with DTSC on trying to get a project labor agreement for this work, our hope was that we would create a new workforce of environmental workers within our own environmental workers that would have a career, not just think about cleaning soil for the rest of their life, but maybe even think about rolling over into our apprenticeship program, learning construction, or even working enough hours to be able to put themselves on the out-of-work list and do construction. For many of you who may or may not know who we are a union of about 8,000 to 10,000 members, active and retired, headquartered here in the city of Los Angeles, doing most of our work in LA County. And we do everything from, besides environmental, curb and gutter, asphalt, we're the miners in the tunnels, all those tunnels that are being dug for the subways. That's the work of a laborer, landscape maintenance and construction. We pour in place and finish concrete. So we do a lot of things, demolition. Pretty much we say we're the grunts of the construction industry. So there's a lot of opportunity for our workers. We don't think of this as the end all be all for these workers. We want them to come in and pick a path for themselves, whether it's to stay environmental workers, that's fine, or to move over and get into construction and help rebuild a lot of our crumbling infrastructure. So with that, when we came in, the original phase, a lot of the original workers, the new workers that were brought in, were already trained and brought in to become members of the local. So we really had no initial input or assistance with the training and the selection of workers in that first phase. With this new phase, we've been asked to kind of be a little bit more proactive in that process and to actually train the new workers. For those of you who don't know, we do have an apprenticeship program. We have an accredited apprenticeship program in Azusa where we train all our apprentices and our regular members who want to learn different parts of our craft. So when we were asked to take up the task of training the new workers, we were given a set of curriculum which includes things such as obtaining the initial lead worker certification, initial hazardous waste certification, CPR, different OSHA classifications, things that we normally train our apprentices in. And we are going to be training some different things that weren't, I believe, included in the first phase that we felt would be necessary to train new workers, because we, as DTSC, we heard a lot of the issues that were brought up by workers on the job site. And so we kind of decided what else can we train additionally to prepare these workers for this type of work that wasn't part of the original curriculum, but that is part the job as a laborer. So moving forward, the way it's gonna play out is we will be having interviews. So all the new workers that were, a selection process was put out basically for anybody that was interested in becoming a laborer and being part of the Exide cleanup. They were told to contact Laura Castillo, and she would verify that they were from the PIA based on their address on their ID and some other verifying information, such as a bill with their name and address on that bill. We, I think to date, have a little more than 90 interested participants, right? And what's going to happen, the next phase is that those individuals will be called by us. We have set the first date of interviews, which will be February 28th. These participants, the first 28 individuals, on the 28th will go before a panel of, and actually before I continue, let me introduce a couple of people from our institution. Luis Carrillo, he's the business agent and came out of the environmental field. He's the agent that's directly assigned to Exide. Efrain Lopez is one of our organizers who also came out of the environmental field. So they always are direct contacts, especially for the workers on grievance issues. But so Luis is actually going to be one of the panelists that's going to be conducting the interviews. One of our apprenticeship coordinators at our school, Mr. Mike Rubio, as well as one of the instructors that's in charge of coordinating the instruction classes that the participants will be participating in. It's an 8-week program, more or less. After the interviews are done, they will go to a boot camp. It's the same boot camp that we require our apprentices to pass in order to become members of the union. And the reason why it's a rigorous boot camp is because a laborer, as I told you all the different crafts that we're involved with, laborers can be told from what day to do flagging to the next day, I need you to move those barriers, I need you to lift that wheelbarrow and carry it over there with these materials. So a laborer has to be prepared to do just about everything and anything that's within our classification. So we want to make sure that our workers are prepared physically. Upon completion of the boot camp, they will be sent directly to our union for initiation, and then they will, the following week, will begin the coursework and until it's completed within the 8 weeks. Then they will be dispatched per the dispatching rules under our project labor agreement to their specific job site. So that's essentially the process and what to expect as it relates to the work program. I don't know if anybody has any questions right now. So for the new workers, the questions we're going to ask were basically, we took our apprenticeship interview list, right? And we took it and said, we changed it for some to fit environmental work, but it's basically, do you want to be a laborer, right? Do you want to get into this industry? Do you want to, because our hope is, like we said, when this job is done, when this work is over, when there's no more Exide, we want people to continue to have a career, to have a job. For those who don't know, top pay for a laborer is, on the minor, right, is, what is it, like, the wage itself, like $60? $62 an hour with benefits on top of that, right? And that includes a pension and annuity, health and health care for not just the member, but the family members themselves. And that's the top level, right? The bottom level is a $38 an hour wage package with the benefits, same benefits. And so every worker that's working as a LIUNA member is receiving that 38, it was 40, 41, 42 now, yeah. We get a bump every year, right? But it's about $41, $42 an hour. That's just the wage itself with the benefit package on top.
So, we're going to hold off because our interpreters cannot hear if they don't have a mic, and we need to go through our Q&A process really quick. So now we're going to open it up for clarifying questions and public comments. As a reminder, there are various ways that you can make a comment here today. In person by raising your hand, and when prompted by the facilitator, comment at the microphone. You will be given 2 minutes to allow everyone an opportunity to speak. You can request a new comment card to ask another question after your 2 minutes. If you're participating on Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. You will be invited to unmute your audio when it's your turn to speak. If you are on the phone, you can press *9 to join the phone queue. We will say the last 3 digits of your phone number when it's your turn to speak. You can then press *6 to unmute your line. If you called into our Spanish bridge line and would like to ask a question, notify our Spanish translator. Our Spanish translator will be available to translate your questions and comments. Lastly, you can also complete a comment card and just submit it to any DTSC staff member. At this moment, we're opening it up to questions. And do you?
Can I ask you a question?
I'm sorry, sir. We're going to get to you, but we have some.
The Mexicans coming from the other side of the border can apply for the same job. Because in my neighborhood, there's a lot of people, they're afraid to work because they don't want to keep back to Mexico.
Okay.
Can they apply for their job? Yes or no? There's a lot of people.
So, okay. I don't know if we need, so what he's asking, Ernesto, is more information on how more community members can apply. So maybe he might need to, maybe he can have a more direct conversation with you. Leave contact information with him.
I'll answer his question directly.
Oh, okay.
It's not the union's job to e-verify. So we don't check for immigration status.
I just can notify people. I'm 88, I'm willing to get some of the jobs. 88.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We have a question from our community member, Arturo Campos Jr. Arturo, are you still here? There he is.
Thank you. First, I want to make a comment, then I'll get to my 2 questions, if that's okay with you. The first comment is that I want to commend, in our experience, the people that have shown up to our home have been extremely professional and very communicative. I also want to commend Dania, who is just full of empathy and all the good things in people.
Thank you.
Primero quiero hacer un comentario acerca de la gente que los contratistas que vienen a la casa. En nuestra experiencia siempre se han portado muy bien y también Dania se ha portado muy bien con nosotros y nos provee buen servicio. So my first question is a general question. So Todd, we talked about working with local government. So I guess my question is, do we have any of Maywood's elected officials here? We don't. I think that's a short term. I'm assuming they live in this community. They should. And as a long-standing voting resident of Maywood, I think it's upon you to impress that upon them. La primera pregunta que hice es, Todd refirió que ellos trabajan con los gobiernos locales y le pregunté si hay representantes aquí del gobierno de la ciudad de Maywood. Y la respuesta es no. Y para mí, eso no se debería. Deberían estar aquí porque ellos viven en la comunidad. Y como un residente de mucho tiempo de Maywood que vota, le pedí ayer, le diría a Todd que les explicara eso, que deberían estar aquí para representar a su comunidad. So, the next question, the second is, what are you doing to mitigate budget shortfalls? Les pregunté que qué van a hacer para evitar que se sobrepasen del presupuesto.
Thank you so much. Do we have somebody that want to answer the question?
So I'll start off by saying that we have enough funding to be able to do the work that we've been talking about today. So that includes all the parkways and at least 1,000 residential properties. After that, we're working with the US EPA to try to get the site listed as a Superfund site, which we believe will result in additional funding to be able to clean the facility and possibly additional residences as well. And we're working to manage costs on the site as best we can, given the inflation issues that Betty was talking about. But we're also balancing that with trying to address the needs in the community. And some of the things that we talked about tonight actually cost more money. But we're doing that because we're trying to address the concerns that you all have raised in an effort to try to do the things that are necessary to be able to make sure the site's being done right, and also to make sure that we're being respectful of the comments that we've received from you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. So the Superfund is a program that's part of federal law. So federal law established a program called the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. But what it does is it establishes a process for site cleanups that qualify for what's called listing. So there's a process that the federal government goes through to identify whether or not a site qualifies for listing under the program, and then if it does, it's eligible for federal funding to be able to fund the cleanup. And so there are Superfund sites all over the country. There are multiple in the state of California that we work on. This one would be by far the largest, at least in terms of area. But it's a long-standing program that's been in place since the 1980s to try to address issues like this.
Thank you. Okay, our next, yes. We're gonna get to you. We have some other community members, so we're gonna.
Yeah, just a clarification, and this is important. We received our Can you hear me? Yeah. So we received our budget in 2021 July. But DTSC has tracked the inflation because we were aware that something was not right, and we have been tracking that inflation month after month. And that helped us actually put together mitigation measures ahead of time. So, as you may know, the inflation is about 3.5% a year. That's the norm, sometimes 2%. Nobody can expect 15% a year, which has been the case the last few years successively. But we have known and identified the problem early on, and we have put together measures to avoid that we have that shortfall you're talking about.
Okay, thank you so much. Our next question is from Jesus Chiquete. I hope I pronounced that correctly. If I did not, I apologize. His question is, my house is at 170 level of lead, and the company said I am not qualified because levels should be 200 level minimum. My opinion is it should be 0 level. 170 is high enough to be clean. I live on 5705 Heliotrope across from YMCA. I don't know if somebody wants to address that really quickly.
So, I would like to let somebody explain Spanish. That question.
Oh, sure, of course. Okay. Do you want to? We'll have her respond, and then we'll have somebody repeat it. Oh, sure. Okay. Laura.
Can you announce again that there's translation equipment and availability outside?
Oh, yes. So, sir, there is Spanish translation equipment outside. We have an interpreter here. I don't know if you saw that. They're right next to the registration table. So we're happy to get you some equipment to assist you if you would like.
The microphone is better.
Solamente para que sepan, disculpa la interrupción, quiero dejarles saber que hay traducción en español, interpretación, nosotros estamos proporcionando servicios de español, por si gustan agarrar un aparato, hay una mesita afuera de la puerta, con mucho gusto lo podremos atenderlo. Gracias.
Sir, if you don't mind, we'd love to get you some equipment so you can, we want to make sure you hear everything.
Yeah, my intention is more than me that maybe they'll speak English, but they'll understand what you do.
Oh, yes.
Then
No.
I have the equipment, so that's why I'm trying to like get down to Spanish.
Okay.
People that don't have the equipment.
No. We have equipment for, we do have equipment for all of our Spanish speakers, is what I'm trying to share with you. So if you would like to get that equipment, right there, sir, and right there behind you, right there. Is there anyone else, if you don't mind raising your hand, we're happy to get you some equipment. Yes.
¿Hay alguien más que ocupa audífonos para interpretación en español?
Right there, señor. Right,
Levante su mano. Yes.
Right there. Right there, sir. Right there. He has the equipment right there, sir. Yes, okay, all right. Oh, okay, she's with him, okay. Is there anybody else, or? Okay, I think that's it, but we are happy to stop and make sure everybody has the equipment they need. I am going to have somebody translate that question. Do we have, there we go.
I will read the question in Spanish. Esta pregunta es de parte de Jesús Chiquete. Mi casa está a un nivel de 170 y de plomo y la compañía dijo que no me encuentro elegible porque los niveles deben de estar a 200 el nivel mínimo. Mi opinión de que debe de estar a 0 el nivel de plomo. 170 es demasiado alto para que vengan a limpiar. Yo vivo en el domicilio 5705 Heliotrope Avenue, a cruzar la calle de YMCA.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. I think we've said a couple times, and I know you understand it, that the funding we have now will allow us to clean up properties that are 200 millimeter or 200 parts per million and above. Every step of this cleanup has gone, we've gone step by step. When we first started, we had just enough money to clean up the most extreme houses. And then the legislature appropriated funds for us to continue the cleanup, and that allowed us to bring the cleanup level down to something like 400 ppm in that neighborhood. And then we got another appropriation, and that's allowed us to get to the 200 ppm. We don't have answers for what it looks like to get below 200 ppm. And we're being very straight with you about that we don't have an appropriation. That's one reason we've turned to EPA for a potential listing as a Superfund site, is to bring in additional resources. And there's just uncertainty about what the possibilities are for cleaning up below that amount.
Our local government is hearing that, so they can represent us and make
You do,
We don't have a microphone.
To point out that we do have a representative from Supervisor Hilda Solis's office, Mr. Antonio Chapa, in the back. So she's been pretty good about attending. I have people attend.
Who is it?
Antonio Chapa.
So you're a participant, you're an observer. We need your office to be a participant, an active participant. Noto que está aquí observando, pero necesitamos que la gente que elegimos sean representantes activos, no nomás que estén aquí observando.
We also have a representative from Supervisor Janice Khan's office for the 4th District, Joel Torres. También tenemos representante de la supervisora Janice Khan aquí, Joel Torres, que está escuchando.
And I will share with you, LA County has been active in a lot of our meetings, and Supervisor Hahn and Solis. So they are active, they're listening, they're paying attention. So yes, they are. They're here, they're present. I do have another question from our community member, and I'm going to have this translated as well. So I'm going to read it in English, and then she's going to read it in Spanish. Okay. She's coming with me. Why don't you come on up here? Okay, it's a long question. How does dispatch know who's in the work program? Because when I called him for status, I was told that he was going by the out of work list and updated certs, not a list. And this question is from Guadaline Wikiling.
La señorita Guadaline Wickling escribió la siguiente pregunta. ¿Cómo es que la persona contestando el teléfono, la despache, sabe de quién está en el programa de Work? Porque cada vez que yo llamo por un estado, siempre me dice que siempre van fuera de la lista de trabajo y también por las acreditaciones actualizadas, no por una lista.
So I think that might be a question that maybe you might be able to respond to, Ernesto.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the confusion is the original work graduates were grandfathered into the program. So basically what that is now is everybody that falls under the PLA categories, community resident, transitional workers, things like that, they all qualify. And we're all basing it on the dispatch request. We can't just dispatch however we want. There are procedures and rules that are highlighted under the PLA. So all of those people now are lumped into one. And it's based on whoever put their name on the out of work list first. So let's say we had a total of 60 people that qualified under the previous work graduate grandfather list. Community residents, transitional workers, all the different percentages that are required. Say there's 60. The first dispatches requested are 30 workers. So we're going to go based on the out of work list of those people that qualify that put their name on the out of work list in that order. We can't jump people unless they're called by name, but there's only one company that can call by name, and that's Power One because they're a signatory contractor. Part of this is the rules that are set up and the guidelines in the PLA. And then on top of that, the contract itself requires that the workers have to have a valid lead certification as well as a valid hazardous waste certification at the time of dispatch. So if they don't have either one, even if the lead's expired and they have a valid asbestos or a hazard, when we get the dispatch request, we can't send that person out because they are not qualified to go out based on the contractor's request. The contractor is the one that puts the specifications of the dispatch. We're basing it on the rules that come in under the PLA. The reality is everybody's going to get out at some point. These are the first workers going out, but as we ramp up, people are going to continue to go out. But these are the rules that are under the project labor.
Thank you, Ernesto. We're going to transition to our online community members that are listening and have a few questions. So I'm going to ask Pedro to go ahead and ask our first question.
Thank you, Dion. We do have one question from an anonymous attendee. What is the current cost of cleanup and landscaping per property? And again, that is from an anonymous attendee.
Right now, it's the number has changed, and depending on the size of the property, this is actually an important point. Smaller property costs less than when you have a property like people are quadrupling volumes. Some have 50 cubic yards, some have 200 cubic yards. But when we average what we have right now, there's somewhere between $70,000 and $75,000 per property.
Thank you, Megan. Let's see. We had we wanted to see if we have any questions on our Spanish bridge line. I do want to remind all of our community members here that we do have interpretation equipment for you. It's available, so if you want it, please raise your hand and we're happy to read that for you. There's no questions? Okay. We have a question from Stephanie Dillard, a community member. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello. First of all, I wanted to thank the people that actually made it possible, the ones that were here since phase one. I see some of you guys here. And for whistleblowers, there was more than one whistleblower. Rocio, Mike, and myself also, we're all whistleblowers, so we were left out of that situation. And my question is, how can we trust you guys if we know that some of these nonprofits have family members that are a part of you guys' a part of the DTSC? How can we know that you guys are being, truthful to everything? How do we know that there's not high levels of nepotism happening? Because this happened in the contractors. The contractors were doing this. and pushing out community workers and advancing people that were all hush-hush and keeping quiet. And when we were reporting new contaminations, that some of them would tell us to delete files, some of them would tell us to remove the photos. And me, I've been here all the time, letting you guys know my ideas, letting you guys know what's going on. Not one of you guys have contacted me. Not one of you guys. I have emails going out to a few of you guys, and I don't know if it's the wrong email, but I'm going off the emails that are on your guys' website, the DTSC. So I don't know what's going on with that. And for me, I just wanted to know why did you guys switch up from 2016, 2017? The way it was 75% of this project was community workers. And then once you guys started adding in all these extra people, the unions, the contractors, that's when things started going wrong. I've been here since 2015, 2016. And now there's a high level of nepotism that's happening. And the way that they're doing it is they're hushing people up. They're hushing people up. And how do we know, the community, how do we know that it's safe? That you guys hired the same companies that are doing it. The same company with just different names. How do we know that it's safe?
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So first of all, I kind of want to clear up a few things on that because I respect what you're saying, but I don't agree with it, and here's why. First of all, the people who are working on ETAG, and I can say this having worked with them for a year, they've been pretty much tireless advocates for the community all along, representing yours and others' interests, and they do that for free. So to argue that somehow there's some kind of relationship between DTSC and those people, anyone who's been watching Exide for 5 minutes knows that we're not buds. We're working collaboratively with people in a competitive environment because they want us to be better and we're trying to get a job done, and we are working together to try to do that for everybody in this room. My second point, I just told you that the people who are on ETAG, I just told you that the people on ETAG are volunteering for this, and they are not compensated in any way for the immense amount of time that they're spending on this, trying to hold us accountable on your behalf.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate it. We're going to go to Joe Gonzalez.
Good evening. I started off with just one question only because I wanted to take it easy on everybody. But I just want to say, everybody knows that the only safe level of lead in your property is going to be 0. Everybody knows the DTSC allowed Exide to contaminate at pre-1983 levels until the day they closed them. Everybody knows that long-term exposure at lower levels, yes, even 170, long-term exposure even at lower levels, greatly elevates your risk of cancer. The initial plans were to leave at least about 25% of the homes contaminated, even at lower levels, which causes cancer. We know it causes cancer. We also know that of the, I think it's 4,800, 4,900 your clinic have cleaned so far. According to USC, there's an 80% failure rate. Are you counting those numbers towards your accomplishments? Because a failure is a failure. Okay. So my question is how many homes are you guys going to leave death traps, toxic waste sites? And based on the fact that a lot of places are going to stay dirty. I know you're talking about funding, but it doesn't make any sense to come back to a home a second or third time to do the job right when you should have done it the first time. And by that I mean, we have contractors who have been with this program for years now, and they haven't bought equipment to do the job properly. Okay? We know that they've gotten millions of dollars from us, but they can't clean up the property because they don't want to take out trees, shrubbery, other things that are in the way. I myself have 6 trees there in my backyard. 2 of them were very large, and there's not going to clean anything in the yard. Why come in? Just take a spoonful of dirt and walk out. Really, that's about all you're going to be able to do. So it's going to stay a contaminated waste site. So my question was, what is the department's plan for long-term exposure at lower levels? If you don't have an answer for that, then you don't have a plan. Okay? Hold on a second.
All right, thank you.
I respected you, sir. Okay? Yeah, we got to get the trees out of there. We got to get our workers PPEs. We got to get our workers to not, and I'm not saying they're antagonizing on purpose, but what we got to do is we have to have our contractors much more responsible in getting a van to keep the parking spaces. Parking spaces are a premium in the entire southeast area. But when you come here and you got 15 people in 15 different cars taking up all the parking spaces in property, of course they're going to get some agitation by the community acting. At that, our contractors should be telling, giving them a orientation and telling them what they're going to face. You're going to face dogs. You're going to face people that are unhappy. You can tell them what to talk to the community about and have them actually accept you in rather than see you as somebody who's coming in and do something against you guys. But it doesn't seem like you guys want that to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Thank you so much. We hear you.
So
Did you want to respond?
Yeah, I'll respond to that a couple ways. So one of the things you said, Mr. Gonzalez, was that we need to get workers more PPE and they need to be protected. We heard you and we agree. When I presented earlier today, what we said is that we are putting the most stringent worker protections in place on this site anywhere in the country. And we're doing that in part because of the comments we received from the public and people like you. Second, you asked that we need to make sure the contractors are more responsible for the work. And I told you that we put an operations plan in place, that we had the public provide input to that plan, and that we're putting a third-party monitor in place so that there's an independent inspector who will report back to you, who you don't have to believe us, you can believe them, and they'll tell you whether or not the work was done right. So you don't have to believe us. We'll just have meetings and you can talk to them. And my third point is, you asked about the USC study, and our answer is that we're doing verification sampling in every property going forward, and we're also working with the ETAG working group to look at sampling properties going backwards so that we can verify whether or not the work was done properly. So if you're asking me about whether or not we hear you, the answer is yes.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. And then we have an online question. So I'm going to go to Pedro.
All right. Well, we do have an online question from a Jane Williams. Jane Williams, whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Hi, Jane. Are you there?
Yes.
There you are. Okay, I believe that's our ETAG member.
Yes, I apologize for not being there in person tonight. I don't necessarily have a question, but I just have a few comments to make, hopefully to clarify some of the points. I do want to applaud DTSC. They have done an amazing job in responding to the many concerns that have been brought up about the cleanup. Not just through the ETAG process, which I have to say has been very thorough. The expertise on the ETAG is impressive. Many of the ETAG members have been on the Exide tag now for over half a decade. A number of scientists, but we also have environmental justice activists, we have community members, we have elected officials, we have appointees to the Board on Environmental Safety, as well as occupational health experts. So, am I going to say that this is going to be foolproof? Absolutely not. I can only imagine that there will be problems from the get-go. But we are hoping that the addition of the third-party monitor and the iterative process of looking at continual excellence and performance from the contractors through the operational plan and health and safety plans will give us opportunities to correct deficiencies and correct things as they move forward. I also want to make a very important comment. This progress would not have happened without the leadership, both on the ETAG and at DTSC. And it is vitally important that we keep that momentum moving forward, that we keep the conversations and the détente intact. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of consistent leadership at DTSC and their commitment to the implementation of the new health and safety plan and the new operational plan. I would hate to see that we have done all this work, and once we get into it and start getting speed bumps, we lose momentum and we go back to, quite frankly, a process that is neither respective of what the community needs nor productive for the cleanup itself. And so this consistency in leadership, I believe, is one of the single most important things that I can advocate for at this point in time. So I do want to, for the first time in leadership that DTSC has, is very long problem. And with the great hope that these contractors actually perform out to the ETAG, continue to reach out to the third-party monitor who will be in place next week, and to let us know when things are going awry on the ground. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of our responsiveness to these whistleblowers and what an amazing sacrifice many of these workers have made. So with that, I just wanted to give those comments. And again, I apologize for not being in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. We are going to go to another ETAG member that we have here, Dr. Rania Subti, ETAG member, and she is with UCLA Loche.
Hi, thank you for giving me the mic. I put in my card when I first walked in, and I'm grateful to have the chance to speak up. I want to say that some of you may know, some may not, but today is a historic day. At 2:30 p.m. today, the OSHA lead standards passed. It was a 4.5-hour meeting that I attended. It has been 11 years that they've been trying to work on updating the OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health lead standards, and there's 2 of them, one for the construction industry and one for the general industry. The standard was written 48 years ago by my mentor. He was my mentor for 13 years. I know he mentored some other people in this room. He helped write the first lead standard. Today he's smiling from the heavens. He passed away 2 years ago. It took that long for the standard to pass, but now we have a standard that's going to protect workers more. We're going to have a standard that will help companies hold themselves liable or accountable to lower levels, which means less will come out of their smokestacks too. I'm sorry that it has taken that long, but that's how difficult it is to get standards passed in this country. We are a state that's progressive. When we do it, other states do it. So today marks the beginning of other states being a bit safer as they adopt their own occupational health lead standards that are going to be more rigorous. Just to illustrate, the allowed level for an 8-hour time-weighted average used to be 50 micrograms per cubic meter. It's now down to 10. It's 5 times less. The action level, meaning the level of lead in the air that triggers any action at all on the part of the contractor, used to be 30 micrograms per cubic meter. It is now 2 micrograms per cubic meter. It is dramatically less, meaning that they can get away with so much less than they used to be able to get away with. The blood lead level that was allowed before someone was investigated, looked upon, dealt with was 40 micrograms per deciliter. It is down to 10. And if an employee is intending to have children, they're supposed to be at 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. And so we finally have a ruling. It's historic. To me, this is I want to cry because this has been a process. We've been testifying. I'm very proud of the organization I belong to. It's the UCLA Labor Occupational Safety and Health Program. I was part of the CSUN faculty before. We've testified, we've sent comment letters. It's been a process in the making. Today we testified again. It was not easy. It was not a clear vote. There were a lot of industry was against it. It was extremely suspenseful. And 4.5 hours later, they voted yes. And so, number one, we all deserve an applaud for this state and the standard setting process. It's based on good science. Now, with that said, we also know that OSHA is understaffed. They don't do a good job enforcing. So to have an agency like DTSC who's willing to take this, to adopt this standard before it became law today, this cleanup effort, all the standards that they're holding the contractors to, they've agreed to this because of their conversation with the ETAG and their consideration of our expertise and knowledge in the field. And no, we are not paid by them. I wish I were. I so much would love to, but I'm not paid by anyone. And I've been on the ETAG for 7 years, and I got 2 hours to come here, and I come late often. And no job has ever paid me for it. I show up because the man in heaven has mentored me to say, you take your knowledge and do something without it and elevate other people's voices. And you've got to collaborate with folks like these, and they have been collaborative. It hasn't always been this way. We're not buddies, we're not friends. We try to be because we got to work.
All right, thank you so much, Rania. We appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Rania. Thank you. All right, we're gonna go to Jose Valenzuela. Jose, are you not? There he is. Yes.
José Valenzuela, ¿es usted?
Sí. Buenas noches, mi nombre es José Valenzuela.
Good evening, my name is José Valenzuela.
Y vengo a ver si hay alguna respuesta en mi problema que tengo aproximadamente 4 años que vengo preguntando por qué no han ido a mi casa.
So I went to see if there's an answer to my question. I've been coming for about 4 years to see why people are not coming to my house.
Me dicen que la ¿cómo se llama? El plomo que había
They're telling me that, well, the lead that had been there,
llega a menos de 200.
that it's less than 200.
Pero pues ya hace mucho tiempo, en mi propiedad, yo vivo en la calle 54.
But it's been a long time. I live on 54th Street.
Y todas las casas de ahí ya han ido a arreglarlas. Y hay 2 casas, la mía y la siguiente, que no han ido.
And all of the houses on the street, they've all gone to take care of them, but there's just 2, mine and the one next to me, that they haven't.
La casa de enseguida del otro lado, la de enfrente, todas. Estoy en medio de la Pittsburgh y la Guipo.
And so the ones that are across the street are between
Guipo and Pittsburgh.
And Fishwood.
Y todas han ido a arreglar todo, pero yo he asistido a los meetings estos.
And everything, they fixed it all, but I've been coming to these meetings.
Y nunca hay no me dan tiempo, no van a hablar conmigo, no nada.
And they never come to me, they never communicate with me.
Y pues ese es el mismo problema.
And it's the same problem.
Sí, y nomás quiero agregar, se me murieron 2 perros de cáncer.
And I just wanted to add that 2 of my dogs died of cancer. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We have a written question from Jennifer Gamato. And we're going to have our Spanish translator translated in Spanish.
Okay, pregunta.
Okay.
Okay, what are the funding sources that will continue?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on
¿Cuáles son los?
hold on 1 second. Is that you? Oh, well, go ahead. You can go ahead and ask your question. You want to stand up? Oh, you need a microphone. Here we go. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, it was earlier on and I had asked a question. So I work with communities for a better environment, and you've been recently speaking to the EPA. So my question actually is about funding. I understand that you say there's enough funding currently, but given the state has a deficit and moving forward, and you've talked about inflation, I'm just wondering, is there other ways that we should be able, like thinking about trying to secure further funding? In addition to that, when I've spoken to the federal EPA, they've explained to me, they were talking mainly about the site, not necessarily about the community cleanup. In addition to that, for getting onto the national priorities list, it even takes further time, even if you do get on it. If they find that there's an evaluation, that will take several years likely. So just going forward, because I'm hearing from the community that there is concern about, their sites have not been cleaned up. What should we be thinking about? But folks are living with lead and high levels of lead. But given how the state is looking at funding currently, and different programs are being cut, particularly environmental programs, I'm just wondering, what should the community be doing? How should we be engaging our state legislators? What does the agency know about, in terms of getting more funding?
Well, I think you put your finger on it. So thank you for the question, Jennifer. As you rightly point out, the state is in a tough budget cycle right now. They're in a deficit. We're really facing some cuts, and it's impacting us already as a department. So things are challenging. That said, number one, you put your finger on it, which is who's serving these communities in the legislature. The legislature has the ability to appropriate funds. Those are the folks that I think are the first folks you would want to talk to about additional funding to get us down below the 200 people. That's the place to start. Of course, we hear you tonight. That's a conversation we can have as an administration, and we will have as an administration, but I think the will has to be widespread, not just one side or the other. There has to be pressure, there has to be willingness, and it's going to take a lot. In a fiscal environment like we have right now, it's going to be very challenging.
Okay, thank you. We'll now go on to our next presentation. I would like to welcome and introduce Brian Strand, Senior Environmental Scientist for the Department of Toxic Substances Control, who will give a presentation and demonstration on the new Exide Cleanup Feedback Management System online. Thank you, Brian. Welcome.
Thank you. Again, my name is Brian Strand. I'm a Senior Environmental Scientist at DTSC. I'm here to give a presentation on the newly released Exide Cleanup Feedback Management System. In the next few slides, I will provide an overview of the system. I will review some key system features, and then I will provide a demonstration on how you can use the system to submit feedback. Before I get started, I'd like to point out that we have tables located on site where you can access the system with the help of DTSC personnel. We have also provided a fact sheet with a QR code and a website link where you can access the system during the meeting using your smart device. Next slide, please. So what is the Exide Feedback Management System? It is an automated workflow process solution that can intake, process, assign, and track public feedback related to the Exide project, all in an easy-to-use online website. DTSC has developed a system to centralize and document and track feedback that we received on the Exide project in order to better meet the public's needs. Next slide, please. So what is feedback? For this system, feedback is an issue, a question, a comment, a complaint, a request, essentially anything related to any aspect of the Exide cleanup project can be entered into the system for DTSC to respond to. Next slide, please. Some of the key features to the system include the ability to submit feedback in 2 separate ways. The first is feedback can be entered by the public directly into our website we created. And second is DTSC can enter feedback received during in-person conversations or phone calls or email conversations, and we can enter that feedback through an internal portal into the system. Next slide. Some additional features for submitting feedback include the ability to upload documents along with your feedback, and those can be PDF or image files. Feedback submissions can be edited in the system using a one-time passcode process, so there'll be no user account needing to be created. Feedback can be submitted with optional contact and address information, or can also be submitted anonymously. And the system will also have English and Spanish options for both viewing the system and communicating with DTSC. Next slide, please. Some system features relating to DTSC's response include our initial response for submissions will be provided within 2 business days. You can request email or phone responses to your submission. If you select email as your primary point of contact, you will receive automated responses after your submission is created, when the submission status changes, when DTSC leaves a comment, and when your submission is closed and a final response is provided. If you identify phone as your primary contact, all communications from DTSC will be over the phone for that feedback. Next slide, please. So how do you access the system? We've provided 3 ways here to access the system. The first is a direct website link that can be found at feedback.exide.dtsc.ca.gov. We have also created a QR code that you can scan with your smart device, and we've provided that on a fact sheet, and we have that located throughout the room there for you to access. And then we also have a link on the Exide homepage at dtsc.ca.gov/exide-home. And so right now, I'd like everyone, if you're willing to pull out your smartphones and you can scan that QR code and follow along with me. In my next slides, I'm going to give a demonstration on how you can submit feedback. Next slide, please. Again, in the next few slides, I'll review how I'm going to go over how to use the site and submit your feedback. And so the first thing I want to point out is the language option. On the right side of the page, you'll see a little button there that you can convert the entire page into Spanish, including any drop-downs or pop-ups that may come up. And so the first thing you'll see is a welcome statement from DTSC that briefly explains what the system is, how it can be used, and what to expect as far as a response. Again, our goal is to provide an initial response within 2 business days. However, not all feedback is going to be able to be resolved within those 2 business days. So just keep that in mind. We've also provided DTSC's hotline and an email address if your feedback may require a more immediate response. When submitting feedback, there are going to be a series of fields to collect some information. Some fields are required, and these requirements can change depending on certain information that you provide. The red star will indicate what is a required field. I'm going to go back to the slide before this. So the first input field is a category. Those categories have been developed by DTSC based on feedback that we've received. It will be in a drop down, so you have to review those categories and try to select the best one that fits your feedback. If there's not one that fits it exactly, there is another field for you as well. The second input on this field is a brief description of your feedback. This is where you can write in your own words just a brief description of the feedback that you're going to provide. Next slide, please. The next field that we're going to get to is a question on whether you'd like DTSC to contact you back about your feedback. If you select no, your submission will be anonymous and no contact information will be collected. If yes is selected, then additional fields will open up to collect some contact information from you. The next question is your preferred contact method. We've got either phone or email. If you select email, then your name and email address will become a required field and your phone number will be optional. And if you select phone, then your name and phone number will become required fields and your email address will be optional. And again, if you select phone as your primary response, all contact about your feedback will be over the phone from DTSC. The next one is your preferred contact language. So this is important because it'll determine how DTSC communicates with you moving forward. Obviously, if you select English, all communication will be English, or if it's in Spanish, then all communications either by the phone or through emails will be in Spanish. Next slide, please. As you scroll down, the next fields you'll encounter are associated with your address. These may be required fields depending on the category in which you selected. If that category requires an address to be associated with it, then that address field will be starred and it will be required. When you start to put in your address here, you will get a pop-up of known addresses that might match your inputs into the system. If you select that address from the drop-down list, then the rest of the address information will be pre-populated for you. If you don't see your address appear, then you'll just have to enter that information yourself into each of those fields. The next field is the message field. So this is where you're going to want to put your detailed feedback information for DTSC. It's a large field and can accommodate a lot of information for you to put in here. The last thing is an optional point where you can upload a document, either a PDF or an image file that may be associated with your feedback. So after you're all done and filled out all the fields that you need to, you can hit the submit button and you get a confirmation that will show you the inputs that you've added to the system. If everything is okay, you can submit it to the system. If not, you can go back and edit anything at that point. And then once it looks good, you can submit again. And then you will receive a confirmation page. So next slide, please. So after you submit, you'll see a confirmation page that contains your submission number. This is the number you can use to access and edit your feedback after it is submitted if you provided email as your preferred contact method. To edit through your submission, you can request a passcode. The passcode is for one-time use and will be required every time you need to communicate with DTSC through the website. And there are 3 ways to do this. From the submission confirmation page, you can request a password by selecting the request a passcode via email. From the email that's sent to you after you submit the system, there's a link where you can request a passcode and access the system again. And then from anywhere on the Exide Feedback website, you can search for your submission number in the search feature at the top. And then it'll pull up a spot where you can enter in your email address to access your submission again. Next slide, please. The last slide I have here is just an example email that you'll receive. This one is just a confirmation that you may receive after you submit your feedback. Again, it contains your submission number and also links and instructions on how you can reaccess your submission. And again, I want to point out, you will only receive emails if you select email as your primary contact method. If phone is your primary contact method, then DTSC will be contacting you via phone about your feedback. That is my presentation, and I will hand it back over to our facilitators.
Thank you, Brian. Alter? Thank you, Brian. Now we'll open it up for a quick round of clarifying questions and public comments again. As a reminder, there are various ways that you can make a comment here today. In person by raising your hand, and when prompted by the facilitator, comment at the microphone. You will be given 2 minutes to allow everyone an opportunity to speak. You can also request a new comment card. If you're participating by Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. You will be invited to unmute your audio when it's your turn to speak. If you're on the phone, you can press *9 to join the phone queue. We will say the last 3 digits of your phone number when it's your turn to speak. You can then press *6 to unmute your line. If you called into our Spanish line and would like to ask a question, notify our Spanish translator. Our Spanish translator will be available to translate your questions and comments. You can also write down your question and we will have it out for us because we're running out of time.
All right, we're going to start off with our BES board member, Lizette Ruiz. Yes, one of our team members is coming right now.
Thank you. I'm actually not a Board of Environmental Safety member anymore. My 2-year term ended yesterday, and unfortunately I wasn't reappointed by the new speaker, Rivas. But my colleague, Georgette Gomez, or former colleague from the board, is currently watching through Zoom. So the board will still, I'm sure the board will still have a continuing presence at the Exide events and meetings. And it was certainly a pleasure for me to be able to represent my community. I'm an environmental scientist who grew up 2 blocks right outside the PIA in Huntington Park. I still live, down the street, literally, in Southgate. And so definitely still invested in continuing my participation throughout the Exide cleanup to ensure that it is done with respect and it's done adequately. And like Jane Williams, I do want to recognize the work that has been done during the past year with Todd's involvement. I feel like everything really turned around. His response and respect to the community is really, I really commend it and I really appreciate it. And I hope that, this type of relationship continues after my involvement as a board member. But I did want to clarify just a couple of things related to the cleanup process and contamination within our community. Prior to the board, I was working in environmental consulting as an environmental scientist and geologist. And I do know that, Exide and other facilities have polluted our community, but there are certain chemicals that are attributable to Exide that can be seen in the soil that is tested. So there can be a correlation made between
what we find in the soil and, kind of figure out and get an idea depending on what we find, like arsenic that we know was emitted from Exide and does affect our community. As in the parkways, there has been a comment about whether the lead is coming from brakes. We can also figure that out if there is the presence of asbestos that is also found in brakes. So there is a way to kind of figure out and gauge where the contamination is coming from. That's all I want to say. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisette.
If I could just take a moment to thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Lisette. So, Lisette, having you participate with us, being on the Board of Environmental Safety has been a real gift, a gift of your time and your expertise, and really provided an additional bridge from the community to the department in terms of the work that we're doing and helping us understand where we're falling short, how to communicate better, where our missteps are, and we will miss your steady hand, the guidance that you provided, and miss your dedication to the work. And it was a half-time job, but we know you did more than that on many, many occasions. So I just want to express my appreciation for everything that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And we have a question in Spanish. ¿Solamente limpiaron la ciudad de Maywood? ¿O cuántas ciudades están involucradas en las 10,000 parcelas que están limpiando? This question is being asked if we only cleaned up the city of Maywood, or how many cities are involved. And la respuesta es que el proyecto está con las ciudades de Maywood, en la área de Los Ángeles, que son Boyle Heights, el este de Los Ángeles, parte del este de Los Ángeles, Vernon, Bell, Commerce, y Huntington Park. I just want to say that the project area includes Maywood, Boyle Heights, parts of East Los Angeles, Vernon, Bell, Commerce, and Huntington Park. So it's not only Maywood, no solamente es Maywood.
Thank you for that, Laura. And then there is the next question. The question is, it doesn't, the community member did not leave their name on the card, but the question is, why isn't there any tribal members on ETAG? So I don't know.
Good question.
I don't know who would like to jump in here. Serlene, would you like to jump in?
Yes, so why aren't there any tribal members on ETAG? That was the question, right? So I was not involved when the first set of members were appointed to the ETAG. So I can't address that, but I can address tribal involvement in general. There's a couple of things that happen when DTS attempts to and reaches out to tribal communities. One, tribal governments are sovereign governments. And as such, we communicate with them in a way that's a government-to-government communication. And there's a whole protocol and procedure for how that has to happen. So when we invite them into these greater, larger community circles, we have to do so not as necessarily a representative of their tribe, because their tribe is a separate government. We can do so as a member of the community, as your neighbor, and they can come if they want. And so it's a very nuanced way of how we have to involve tribes. So one of the things that we're looking at from my department, because when I spoke earlier, I told you I had some responsibility for the tribal affairs, is we are starting to identify organizations such as Native American health organizations and other organizations that work with communities, some of the tribal college representatives and so forth, so that we can reach tribes tribal communities through other programming that is directed to tribal communities. Because to bring someone on as a tribal representative opens up a whole different set of protocols.
Thank you so much for that, Serlene. We only have a few minutes left, and we did have Mr. Brian Strand that gave a presentation on our new system, and I wanted to see if there's any questions from the audience that relating to that, because we only have a few minutes, and I do want to make sure we address any questions. So I'm going to, if you have any questions related to that, if you can raise your hand. Okay, all right, sounds like no, so we're going to go to our viewers online. Again, we have some of our community members that are watching via Zoom, and so we're going to hand it off right now to Pedro for a question.
Yes, we actually, we do have one question from a community member, Carla Rivera. Ms. Rivera, we want to thank you for your patience. Just want to follow up and make sure you still have the question. She just put her hand down, but it has been up. Ms. Rivera, you have the line.
Hi, yes, my question is for Ronnie or for anybody who has the scientific expertise for chemical. There's anything that we can do if we don't qualify for the percentage to be cleaned up? There's any kind of detergent or chemical that can help that individually we can add in our soils or plant or certain kind of things that we can do by our own pay or risk, but something that has been proven that works good.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if I make myself understand.
Yeah, so as I understood your question, it was about whether or not there are things that you could put in your soil to try to reduce risk. We are looking at that, but it doesn't remove lead from the soil. It just sort of sequesters it there. So we feel that the best approach, and this is why the removal action plan is designed this way, is we feel the most appropriate approach is to remove lead from the community. And we stand behind that. I mean, every pound of lead that we remove from soil is one less pound of lead that's in your community. We are looking, and we're working with the working group on trying to figure out how best to address any remaining lead in the community. And so your question is a good one, and we're working on it, but we don't have any answers on it yet. The idea that there might be technologies we can look at is something we're open to, but we need to make sure that the science holds up before we do anything like that.
Thank you, Todd. The other thing is that, yeah, if you have lead in your yard, it's very important to understand how to keep yourself and your family safe, what precautions you should take. And we have worked with the LA County Department of Public Health and with the California Department of Public Health to make materials available so that you can know how to manage your soils, how to handle possible lead exposure and reduce it as much as possible. And do you want to say any more about the availability of those materials, Letty?
I was about to say that all these brochures are available on the website. And I don't know if the team has printed some of them out. For those who are present, I think we can make them available to you. And for those who are joining us via phone or online, we do have all that material available on our website. The last word is hygiene. It's important to clean your hands when you get exposed to the soil. Make sure you don't grab the soil inside the house by leaving your shoes outside, brush them off. The minimum precautions could serve a long, long way. So all that is available on our website.
Thank you so much. So we are getting towards the end of our meeting, but we have 3 more community members, so we're going to try and get to at least the last 3. The first one is Genesis Sandoval. Are you still here? Thank you, Genesis.
Okay, I'll try to be as quick as I can. Hi, community. My name is Hennessy Sandoval. I'm here representing Semillas for Safe Soil. We're an organization that does seed canvassing, so we go door to door giving away seeds that phytoremediate the soil. And apart from that, we also are trying to organize citizen science to make more sustainable solutions that are cheaper and better for the environment to help heal this Exide situation. So if anyone's interested in getting free seeds, please reach out to me after this meeting. And on that same note, as I'm sure you were referring to zeolite, you didn't mention that name. but Prospering Backyards, another organization, is also working to sprinkle minerals over the lawn so that it can sequester lead in the top inches of soil. It doesn't get rid of all of your lead, but it does further percolate into the soil further down, and it seems like a very promising solution that can have immediate results. What our organization is trying to do is that we want to create phytoremediation seeds. So we want seeds that are going to be uptaking lead so that we don't have to excavate anymore. So much of what that's doing is it's actually creating more lead dust into the community, and it's actually bringing up historic lead further out into the community. So what could have been cleaned is now going neighbor to neighbor's house. And so I just wonder if we are having an intersectional solution. Apart from just developers, are we also bringing scientists alongside and geologists alongside these developers?
Thank you.
Yeah, so first of all, I appreciate your comment because, I mean, we like those types of ideas too. And DTSC is scientists. We are geologists. We're engineers. I have a doctorate in environmental science and engineering. I've been doing this work for way too long. The idea that you can just put zeolite on the ground and that it will sequester lead needs a lot more work. Zeolite really has to be mixed well in the soil under certain conditions to be effective. Otherwise, you're essentially dropping dust on the soil and it's not going to do any good. With regard to phytoremediation, the idea of using plants to uptake lead is a good one and it deserves more study. But once the plants are grown, you have to figure out what to do with the plants, because if the plants just die, then the lead goes back onto the soil. If you rip it out, then you got to deal with it. My point is this. We all want the right kind of solutions for the community, and I think we're open to working with organizations like yours to make sure that the solutions that are being proposed and implemented are representative of solid science. And I think there's a way where we could work together to do that. But where I agree with you the most is that all of this has to be driven by good science.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you.
It's very cost effective. It wouldn't cost a lot. $75,000
Thank
for a house.
you. Thank
Compost
you.
is free. I'm just saying.
Rocio?
I hear you.
Rocio? Do we have Rocio? Is Rocio still here? There we go.
I had my head up for about an hour.
I'm sorry. We will get to you, Felipe. Hold on, okay? We will get to you. I didn't see your hand. Okay, we will get to you. We're gonna get to Rocio really quickly, and then we'll move over to you, Felipe. Oh, okay. She's already answered.
All right. My name is Felipe Aguirre, and I live and work here in the city of Maywood since 1997. And also I wanted to let the people who are here from this community that the ETAG was actually formed here at Maywood Academy High School many, many years ago when we wanted to bring the issue of the lead cleanup to DTSC and started to develop this collaborative body. It's been very difficult at certain times to work with the agency, and I think that as many of my colleagues have said here also, the last year or 2 years, there's been a lot of changes that have been positive in terms of bringing a lot of results, particularly for the safety of the people that are working on the project. You know, many of them do live and work here in these communities. The thing that I'm really worried about is the issue that is being raised about future funding tying into the question of the EPA. Now, we here in Maywood have experience with Superfund sites. We've had 2 of them in Maywood. One at Anchor Hockey, which is on District and 52nd Drive, then also the Pinnacle Superfund site, where now we have the Maywood Riverfront Park. Those 2 projects to get listed as a national priorities list took probably about 10 years each one. And then to do the cleanup, it was very limited in the way that the cleanup was done. So I want to make sure that we're not letting people know that supposedly, we're gonna try to obtain money from the EPA to do the cleanup. That's not the way that the process works. They're not going to get involved in doing the residential cleanup. They're going to be doing the cleanup, if at all, at the site where the plant is at, and that needs to be cleaned up. It's not being cleaned up right now. and the communities right around the factories, the industry around Exide is where the cleanup is going to happen by EPA if it's listed in the national priorities list. So I wanted to know what you can tell us about that. Are you trying to obtain money from EPA or support for the residential cleanup?
Well, thank you so much for the question. Well, right now, it's hard to talk about the facility versus the residential. The way the process works is USCP is going to look at all the data, and we have shared all the data with them, both residential and facility. They will do their own assessment of basically the extent of the contamination in the facility and beyond. I can't speak on behalf of USCP and say it's going to be 1.7 mile, 1.4 mile, 2 miles. That part of the process is to really do the investigation independently of DTSC and come up with that rigorous. So that is a process that DTSC does not control.
I understand you do not control that, but I mean, you are asking certain things of EPA as an agency. What are you asking of them?
We are asking for the whole project, that is both the residential and the facility to be listed. We're not asking just for the facility. So if you look at our request, and it's actually published online, you will see that the request includes everything that's quote-unquote called Exide project at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, EPA will not come into a cleanup if DTSC is involved in it.
So Felipe, I mean, we're working with US EPA to, they're working to list the site, and we're working with them on how best to handle the site and the residences and everything. And we've been talking with them about this for some time. So we don't have any solutions for it yet, and they're continuing to work on it, but this is something we can continue to update the working group as it moves forward. We, like Meredith said, don't know exactly what the future is after a year and a half, basically after this year through June of next year, because that's what we have funding for. But we're committed to continuing to move the cleanup forward. We're going to need all your support as we do that. And I think we're going to need to work collaboratively with EPA and the working group and with everyone to try to figure out the best way of getting that done, but we don't know what the answers are right now.
Thank you. And we're going to take our last question from Danny, our community member. There she is. Thank you, Danny.
Hi, everyone. It's not a question. It's more of a response to the last question that was asked over Zoom about ways to remove lead from soil. And you can plant sunflowers in your yard, and that removes lead from your soil. The tall ones, not the native bush sunflowers, but if you want seeds, you can go to Mudtown Farms. They have this dope jar of seeds inside their building. You can just grab some sunflower seeds and plant them in your yard. Yeah, they'll be there this Saturday. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Danny. All right, so we are going to go ahead and close out our meeting. I want to thank all of our presenters here today: Meredith Williams, Director of DTSC, Todd Sachs, Deputy Director of the Site Mitigation and Restoration Program, Darlene Grant, Deputy Director, Office of Environmental Equity, Ernesto Pantoja, Luna, Local 300, and Brian Strand, Senior Environmental Scientist. We do have some information hotlines that we want to share with you as well. Our DTSC cleanup hotline number is 844-225-3887, and the email address is exide@dtsc.ca.gov. Los Angeles County Bloodletting. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello. Give me like one more minute, I promise. One more minute. So we're gonna go ahead. So thank you so much for attending. Or if you can hear me, clap one time. If you can hear me, clap 2 times. Okay. A couple of things. I do want to thank one of our partners here in the community is Los Angeles County Department of Public Health. Janice Gully is here. I want to thank her for always making sure we have free blood lead testing here for community members. I want to thank the YMCA Maywood for providing this free space for us to come and meet today. And I want to thank our hardworking team members that put this public meeting on for you today. Thank you so much. Get home safe, and we will see you at our next public meeting. Have a good night.